I think we're ready.
I think we're ready. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. I appreciate you taking the time to come inside the Capitol today on the as we start the Memorial Day holiday. I'm glad that not everybody took the day off, so we're very pleased to see such a great turnout. My name is Dan Dorman. I'm a former state representative from the Albert Lea area. I served when I first elected in '98 and did not seek re-election in 2006. Here today with my friend, the Mayor of St. Paul, Mayor Coleman, to talk about local government aid and the potential unallotment. And I think it's realistic, I shouldn't say potential unallotment, because there will be certainly reductions in LGA. We understand that. We're not asking that LGA not be cut. I think what our message is to cut LGA in a thoughtful manner, to do it so it's not so disproportionately large, particularly given the LGA cuts of 2003 and the unallotment in December of 2008, which has, the cities are still, that came at the end of their budget year and they had to really deal with it in 2009. They're already dealing with LGA cuts. So we understand that the program is going to get reduced. The question is the magnitude of the cut. And if you think of the three cuts that were proposed, you had the governor with a proposal, the House with a proposal, and the Senate with a proposal. You know, we think that most cities should be able to survive and live with the House cuts. I think that would be a reasonable expectation. You know, personally, I'm concerned about the geographic proportionalism of the cuts. It seems like if you go too deep, that certain cities are going to, and their residents ultimately are going to pay a bigger price than the residents in other cities. So we're here on a bipartisan basis to ask the governor to do one of two things: one, be more proportional in the cuts, or two, I personally would like to see the legislative leaders and governor continue to talk. I don't think there's any value in dragging all 201 legislators back to sit around and look busy without doing a lot. But I do think there's value in the governor and legislative leaders trying to find a different solution to the problem, and then bringing everybody back for a one-day special session. I think that ultimately would be the best goal. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but I think that would be the best outcome for the residents of the state of Minnesota. We've got some snappy material here that I want you to take a look at, and I think that if you look at the state's history, this graph clearly shows that you put money, if you backed it up a biennium, you put money into the LGA program, property taxes go down. You take money out, property taxes go up. Cities really don't have the same menu choices that the state has. Cities really have two choices: raise property taxes or cut programs. The state, if you look at, no matter you look at the governor, the House's solution, it certainly wasn't without gimmicks or shifts, whether that be shifting the education payment. Cities don't make education payments. They can't shift $1.7 billion of K-12 funding. Don't have that luxury. Cities don't have a lot of ongoing tobacco revenue coming in. They're not able to sell appropriation bonds. They don't have that luxury. Cities don't have an income tax. We do pay, I think Mayor Coleman will mention it, we do pay a property tax. There's a statewide business property tax. Perhaps that ought to stay with the cities and not come to St. Paul to be distributed. The property tax has typically been, or recently been, under the purview of the city. So there are certainly a lot of things that can happen between now and when the unallotments are made. And so with that, I'll stop talking, turn it over to the Mayor of St. Paul, Chris Coleman, make his comments, and then we'll stand for any questions that you have.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for coming out this morning. We've been here before. We are at crunch time right now for cities across the state of Minnesota. We've stood with mayors of every political persuasion, Democrat, Republican, and Independent. We've stood with mayors from across the state, representing large cities, small cities, medium-sized cities, and we all are speaking with one voice. The cities across the state cannot afford the cuts that are before the governor. They cannot afford what the governor is proposing. The governor said that public safety was his #1 priority. The cities across the state of Minnesota are the entities that provide public safety, and our ability to do that will be threatened significantly if the proposed cuts that the governor has on his desk go forward. We're asking the governor to reverse what he has been talking about and start understanding the importance of cities in this state. We're the economic engine of the state of Minnesota. We are the communities that help support businesses. We are the communities that educate our children, and we can't do it without resources. We've already borne the brunt of cuts from 2003, and as a result of that, property taxes have increased dramatically, upwards of 68% since 2003 across the state of Minnesota. If these cuts go through, property taxes will rise dramatically. It's about real life, and it's about real jobs and the real future of our communities. We stood yesterday with the mayor of St. Charles. You may recall that his largest employer had a large fire in his community. With the proposed cuts in local government aid, the ability to rebuild that plant is threatened, and the ability to put those 250 people back to work is threatened. We saw that with the floods and the communities that responded to help Moorhead. They came with their services to help save a community in the state of Minnesota. Our ability to do that will be threatened. This is crunch time. We asked the governor to change course. But we also asked the Minnesotans, the residents of Minnesota, to take the governor up on his offer, to call him, to email him, and tell him we can't afford any more cuts in our community. We can't afford property taxes to continue to go up. We have been living within our means. We put a hard freeze on in hiring in the city of St. Paul last fall. As a result of that, we're 40 officers down from our authorized strength. We've taken pay cuts. We've frozen wages. We've done the things that we have been asked to do, but there's a limit. And when you start cutting any further, you cut into the basic services that cities provide and that are necessary for cities to thrive. And when cities don't thrive, Minnesota doesn't thrive. We got to get out of this mindset of a race to the bottom, and we got to start thinking about the future. And you can't do that when you're just slashing and burning. We hope that the governor listens to the people of Minnesota, listens to bipartisan mayors and legislators from across the state, and takes another path.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there questions that we have? If they're
well, as you
ready
know,
to go, I'll try to avoid them.
as you know, the governor calls it hogwash, that the cities have done everything they can do. And he has specifically pointed out St. Paul before with the pond, says that cities can do much, much more, including spending down all their reserves. Why can't you do that?
Well, let me speak first to the reserve issue. Unlike the state, in cities, and we've talked about this before, and the governor knows this, and we sat in the conference room with the governor, and he understands this, or at least said he understood this. We have a cash flow account. We don't have a rainy day fund and a cash flow account. We have one account that is our reserve. And if we spend down those reserves, not only are we unable to make payroll, and we would have to borrow money every month just to pay our employees at additional costs. But when Moorhead had a serious situation and they had to buy $600,000 worth of sand, they went into their reserves to be able to do that. So it is not possible for us to, there are cities, cities are in different positions, so I can speak specifically to St. Paul. We went through a detailed analysis of our fund balance policy several years ago. We put in written policy the level of the fund balance, what it should be, what was necessary for us to meet cash flow needs, what was necessary for us to maintain our AAA bond rating, and we are at the minimum level. And in December, when the governor cut $5.7 million at the end of the year out of our budget, we were able to use that fund balance to continue operations. And because we are very prudent and fiscally sound, we have been able, because of the hiring freezes and other strategies, been able to build that up to the minimum threshold. So this isn't just a pile of cash that we're sitting on that we don't want to spend.
The governor says that if the state borrows, for example, he's prepared for the bond rating to go down. Why not the cities let the bond rating go down temporarily, build it back up later? I think people don't understand this.
Well, because
go ahead and borrow, is what they're saying.
Well, first of all, we don't have the ability to just borrow money. But if our we can bond for projects and we can use our capital improvement budget to bond. But if our bond rating goes down, then the cost of borrowing goes up significantly. So again, it's just a chase to the bottom. If it costs you more to pay back those bonds than it would have otherwise, then you've got to take that money from somewhere else. It is penny wise and pound foolish. And for a governor to sit there and say that we shouldn't care about our bond rating is one of the most fiscally imprudent things I've ever heard.
Are there other programs you think you could look at, anything the city's doing that might not be totally essential in these times?
You know, we've looked, and again, I want to speak for St. Paul, but I've talked with mayors across the state, and they will tell you the same thing. They've looked at merging departments. They've looked at eliminating departments. They've cut. I talked with one mayor yesterday. He said he had, I think, 220 employees 5 years ago, and now has 140. Just not through layoffs, but through attrition. That's a pretty significant cut. In St. Paul, we've merged departments. We've done best practices audits. We've had outside audits of our fire department. We have frozen positions. We are constantly looking at ways to cut money and ways to do things more efficiently. We closed 8 rec centers in the city of St. Paul 2 years ago. I put together a panel of CEOs, 5 CEOs from the city of St. Paul, to look at the city's budget. This was the first year that I was in office, and I asked them to really go through, from a business perspective, line by line by line. These were, not liberal Democrats. These were Republican businessmen. And they came to the conclusion you don't have the resources that you need to be able to provide the services that you're supposed to provide. I would ask the governor, before he starts attacking cities, to go to those communities and really look, before he starts making just bold accusations about fiscal irresponsibility, look at how prudent the cities have been. It's one thing to say some kind of generic, throw out a generic assertion, but it's another thing to go to Floodwood and realize that they're not going to be able to plow their streets this winter if this aid cut comes.
On his radio show this morning, the governor criticized St. Paul in particular, saying they were spending millions of dollars on things like a free shuttle to Como Park. You mentioned that specifically. How do you respond?
Well, that free shuttle at Como Park, let me say first of all, Como Park is one of the largest free attractions in the state of Minnesota. Over 2 million families from across the state come to Como Park. The other day when I was out there, I saw buses of school children from New Prague and Northfield and from other cities across the state of Minnesota, especially at a time where families don't have the resources that they might need to be able to pay $20 for a person to go out to the Minnesota Zoo. They can come to the Como Zoo, and they can go to the Botanical Garden, and they can go out and they can picnic with their family. Como Zoo, with 2 million visitors, is extremely crowded. People have to park literally miles away. So a couple of years ago, we went looking for some additional resources to be able to provide a shuttle so that families can get to that free zoo. And guess where that money came from? The governor's own agency. It was a federal grant through the Met Council that the Met Council has provided to the city. So the governor can attack me, but I think he should look at his own strategies. If he's going to attack the city of St. Paul, I wish he would look at the state of Minnesota a little bit closer before he does that.
So the shuttle's being paid for by federal grant still?
Through the Metropolitan Council.
And does it approach millions, which is the word
I
I
don't
want to use?
I don't know what the figure.
1.2
1.2 million.
Where should the money come from to make up the difference? Should you just reallocate the cuts? Or do you think that there should be, or are you an advocate for tax increases of some kind?
Well, I think that you have to look at the revenue side. There's no question about that. But the problem is when you can't even engage in the discussion where that revenue should come from, doesn't really get kind of, I guess, discussed as appropriately or as thoroughly as it should. The governor's hard-line stance on revenues, I think, made it impossible to have an intelligent discussion about what the proper methods of revenue collection were. It was just simply saying no. But you can't, you can't, we've already seen with this line item vetoes of health care. 300 people at North Memorial, 100 people at HCMC. I've talked with other folks at Regents Hospital that are very worried that Regents Hospital may not even be able to stay open. So that's, is that the future of the state of Minnesota that we want? Our level 1 trauma centers being threatened to close their doors? And if you're going to talk about public safety and say public safety is a priority, and then cut funding to the very people that provide that public safety, 2/3 of the budget in the city of St. Paul are police and firefighters. 2/3. So if you're going to have these kind of dramatic cuts and say that we shouldn't have to impact public safety, we'd have to close every library, we'd have to close every rec center, or we'd have to close the city attorney's office. It doesn't work. You have to have revenue as part of the discussion. If you accept that, then we can have a fair conversation about where that revenue is best collected from and what the balance of cuts and revenue is. But that's what we've done in St. Paul. We looked at a balance of cuts with an increase in revenue. And as a result of that, we took a structural budget deficit that we had in 2006 when I became mayor and turned it into structural balance, not in the 4 years that we had planned, but in 3 years. Because we took a balanced approach and said, we have to cut, but we also have to understand that you can't, if an army travels on its stomach, cities have to have revenue. But we get too caught up sometimes, I think, in the idea that it's just about revenue. These are people. These are police officers and these are firefighters. These are libraries that are providing out-of-school time programs for our children. These are plows that are coming down our streets in the winter so people can get to work and trucks can move. It's pretty simple. You can't do it. And all of the assertions about waste and all of these things is done on a very generalized level. Come down to the cities. Come down to Wilmer. Come down to Worthington. Come down to Rochester. Come up to Floodwood. And look at the cities and look at what they're doing and how they're managing their budgets.
Why not close libraries and rec centers, if that's the option?
Public safety is, our first responders, police and firefighters. But if we are closing our libraries and our rec centers, and the kids that are in those facilities after school learning to read are out on the streets, we can never hire enough police officers to be able to take care of the challenges that we're going to face. And I think that that's one of the most frustrating things. We have become so short-sighted. We're walking along looking at our feet, and I think we're about to run into a wall. You've got to take a long-term view. The cost savings by providing a quality out-of-school time program to a child versus spending $1 million over the course of that child's lifetime when they get older to incarcerate them because we didn't get them off on the right start is absolutely insane. And we need to start thinking about the future of what Minnesota is going to look like 10 years from now if these cuts keep on going forward. If you have lost your job and you can now go to a library in the city of St. Paul and get help trying to find a job, to cut that program is to cutting the people that are most in need. At a time where the economy is tough, people rely more and more on the services that cities provide. If you look at, I was reading an article on Susie Orman, the finance guru. And she had some woman call in and she said, the woman was saying, Susie, I'm in, dramatic straits. I lost my job. I'm in debt up to my ears, blah, blah, blah. I can't wait to buy your book. And Susie Orman said, you can't afford to buy my book. What did she advise her to do? Go to the library. You can get it there for free. At a time when people need city services the most, they're going to be cut to the bone. And people that need help after school, kids that need help after school, or a father that needs to find a job, is not going to have the resources to be able to do that. This is a foolish strategy that we're embarking on.
Since taxes are off the table, do you want the governor to cut into K-12 or cut more deeply into higher ed or cut more deeply into human services to save your money?
Well, first of all, this is not my money. This is police officers and firefighters, it's libraries, it's parks. But it has to be balanced, and Representative Dorman has an idea, whether they choose to take up on that, where they would actually get together and do the job that when we stood here last week, we said, get the job done. Don't balance the budget on the state of Minnesota. Come to a conclusion. Come to an agreement. There's no reason why they couldn't do that still. The governor took the tax bill off the table yesterday. He continues to eliminate options, and it gets harder and harder. But at this point, we would hope that we would understand, instead of engaging in name-calling, that we would understand that these are real threats to services that we're providing. I don't know if Representative Dorman wants the same thing.
What do you want to cut? K-12, more higher ed, more human services? And what do you want to cut instead?
First thing, to answer that question, you have to know what the proposed cuts are. Because I think that's part of the message is, as he looks at the options, if he does go down the unallotment road, he does have options in there, and he can cut things more or less. He could cut LG even more and put more money into higher ed. So there's the menu of choices of things that he could do. I don't think any of them are set out. But I was kind of intrigued as I read some of his comments about, you ought to be able to squeeze down any other unit of government, says they can't. That's I believe it's hogwash is what it was termed as. The reality is that then why not K-12? I don't think we ought to cut K-12 either, but if the theory is that anything can be squeezed down, there's all this fat out there, why are certain things off the table? What is the rationale for that? And so my preference, as I said earlier, would be, I don't have, I understand that when you're the governor, no matter what party you're from, you have a lot of influence. I think that maybe surprises some of the other legislative leaders, but he's still the governor. If he's going to say no new taxes and an option is the appropriation bonds, I just sold $1.5 billion of appropriation bonds and took unallotment totally off the table. That's what I personally would have done. So I think it's very difficult for us to say exactly what he should do. We're just asking that he does it. Think about how to do it proportionally, how to do it geographically. Your question about should we cut libraries? Well, okay, you're going to shut the library down in Albert Lease and elsewhere. And I think that really should be the question. It should be part of the debate is, what is the vision of the state of Minnesota? Is it a vision where only parts of the state are served by library services, so that the library in Albert Lee, for example, serves all of Freeborn County? Those folks, because of where they live geographically, shouldn't have library services, but others should. I mean, if that's kind of, I call it the South Dakota vision. If you think of South Dakota, you got a couple really, 3-4 really nice cities to live in. They got great services, and the rest of the state, pretty nice to ride my Harley Davidson through, but I'm not sure that I'd live there. If that's the vision that we have, then let's be upfront and honest with folks and say that's where we want to take the state of Minnesota. I don't think that's where the residents of the state of Minnesota want to go.
You've raised an interesting point about options that the state has as opposed to what cities have when it comes to shifting or borrowing or whatever it is. Is it hypocritical in your view for the governor to criticize you for not doing enough and he has the tools that you don't?
I'm not sure if hypocritical is the answer or if it's spin. I think that it's obviously we've hit a nerve. I think the facts, if we can get them out, and I think that's difficult. I think one of the difficulties in this is we're talking about theoretical cuts that people don't see yet or understand. I'm afraid that the people aren't going to react until after the cut is made. Our job is to try to talk about them and highlight and try to get people to think about this before they're done. But I think obviously in the response, we struck a nerve. I don't think we have to engage in the same, name calling or bashing of things in order to get the point across. But obviously, it's kind of like when you strike a nerve and you see the reaction out of somebody, that generally tells you that you're on the right track.
Many, perhaps most other states are either enacting or considering tax increases. Is the governor behind the trend on this?
Well, I guess it depends what you label a tax increase. I think property taxes are tax increases. I think that, I don't have the number in front of me, but I think even the, was it Revenue or Finance was showing what property tax increases statewide. Do I think he's behind the trend? I don't know. I'd have to go look at all 50 states. I would have personally, if I had been there, goes back to when I was here, I'd have expanded the sales tax to include clothing. I think it's a no-brainer. I think we ought to do it. I thought we should have done it when we had revenue and lower the rate. I think that there are options that we ought to look at. However, if he is saying, boy, we're not going there, well, I don't like pulling the federal government model of going into deficit financing for appropriations, he's still a governor. And if that's what he's going to do, then sell the tobacco. That's a tax increase for somebody else, by the way. The appropriation bonds, we have to be honest with it, that's taking revenue out of a future year that somebody else is going to have to make up for. But if that's what he's going to demand, you got to respect the office and say, well, that's probably our only game in town.
What do you make of the fact that this governor can take the credit for cutting the budget, but not take the blame for the steps you have to take as cities when your budgets are slashed? He likes to say correlation does not denote causation, and just because your property taxes are going up doesn't mean...
That's a lawyer talking if I ever heard one.
Yeah, well, it doesn't mean that he's done it.
Well, he done it. Let's be clear. If I got to lay off firefighters or police officers, or if I got to close libraries, he done it. That's the bottom line, because we have done what we can do. We've balanced our budgets. We have made cuts. We have increased revenue. But local government aid isn't just some big fancy term for welfare for cities. It's a fundamental bargain between cities across the state of Minnesota and the state government. We send revenues up to the state, and in exchange, we expect a certain amount of money back that allows us to provide the basic level of services. And so let's be clear. We'll close with, the governor asked for input, and we think that folks should give it to him. Budget ideas at state.mn.us or 800-657-3717 is the number to call. We hope that people do that. Thank you.